Hello, people. This week I decided to read Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. He he's a more famous modern writer, right? In the scope of writers, right? Your Frank Herbert's dead. Your Tolkien is dead. I think Crichton's dead now, but it's only recently. And I say that because I feel like when people think writing and classics, we might have started to overlook sort of modern classics. And modern classics being like, I would say like this, like a lot of his books, I would put under modern classic, in that they're new writers who I would put up next to your Jane Austens and your Melvilles in how good of a storyteller they are, how well they get their concepts across, to how broad of an audience that they can receive that message to. You can get some very good writing, but it's too in its own minutia to appeal to a broad audience. You can get some that's broad based but doesn't feed sort of a reader. His like the old classics, I think does both. I just think it doesn't have, what do we say, the patina of time yet. I think that as the years go on, as the decades go on, I think people are going to more and more appreciate the book themselves. Because this, what do I have? Sphere. There's a lot of there's like 4 or 5 of his books that have ended up movies. Most of them. It's actually quite incredible. But he didn't write movie books, right? He wrote his own book. And I wonder if, in a weird way, if that's detracting. If people are just going, oh, it's just a guy who writes for film. It's not that case at all. They're really well-written books. They're digestible. They're smooth. There's a great flow in the narration. It challenges. It has challenging ideas. A lot of his books. In that the author's taking a challenge here, right? And trying to grab a concept and get it across in an efficient way. And in that sense, it's enjoyable for readers. I'm getting more out of these than, just a dinosaur or whatever the other books are. He'll grab a concept. He's not afraid. So I would put this in with new classics, right? In books that can be enjoyed by everyone. We start with a man named Bannon Bowman. Bowman, his wife, and his kid Tina, or I don't know. They went to Costa Rica on a vacation, and again, an odd way to start. The kid ends up attacked by a lizard, right? In the interactions between them, you have the full. You can feel the interaction, the not the strain, but relationships get sort of, I guess, an intensity about them that carries into odd spots, right? So you would think everyone's just happy on vacation, but that's not the case. We carry the issues of our relationships wherever we end up. A lot of times, emotion doesn't care about location. All through all 3 of them, right? The daughter doesn't want to listen to the mom talk about losing weight. The dad's trying to, say, relax. We're on vacation. It's supposed to be easy. This very, very complex dynamic, but it's for characters who won't appear again in this book. And so we're starting with named characters that then disappear essentially from the narration. It is just a subtle change of pace or bending of the rules. Rules being, your first named character is your character, and we move with them through the book. And typically speaking, they're not supposed to die. And typically speaking, everyone around them can die. And this is, the sort of the unwritten contract readers have when they start a book. So when you vary this, it's going to, kick up. What is it when they say? When you see a diver walking underwater, and he starts stepping on the ground and the dust starts going, that's happening in the reader's brain. There's a way things should be, and when you change it, all this other action happens. Now, as the author, you have to keep track of that action, right? And you add a lot of complexity for yourself as an author when you do this. The benefits being I as a reader am more on edge, right? I'm not exactly sure what the rules are. I can be more tense in spots. And I suppose that really helps for what we end up getting, right? Which is a dinosaur book. You got to know that. You see it on the cover. You know it if you've watched the movie already. That part's not going to be a surprise. But typically, subject matter in a book isn't, right? If I'm reading Dune, I understand I'm going to be in the desert in a minute. I understand it might be science fiction, if I read Star Trek. We know what we're getting as readers. We want what we're expecting. And I think he uses this as a way to, the offset makes what I get in the end more enjoyable because then I believe it a little more. Does that make sense? I feel like that's what he's doing with this. Our author does tend to do this throughout the book as well. And in his other books. What is it in this one? There's an attack on the kid. Police get involved. Doctors get involved. Labs in other parts of the world get involved. We have an animal of unknown origins. It could be deadly. Medically, we might need to know. But it's also Costa Rica and it's a large jungle environment. And it could, on the off chance, be an undiscovered animal of some kind. In which case, fame and glory can await. So interest gets driven up. And so we'll go to a lab. And it's people talking in a lab. They're naming each other. I always say named characters because that carries more weight in a story. Again, in the unwritten rule. He gives them a name. He gives them personality. They have interactions. And then again, they disappear from our narration. But I think it helps to expand out the world, right? So if I drive from where I live to Dallas, I'm passing town after town along the way. Those towns are full of people. In my mind, I can carry that, right? I understand there's a town full of people there, even though I had no interaction with them. It feels, you start to feel like you're in this real world because there are these other interactions. Same as I would have on this trip, but in book form. Again, it's a very subtle move, but it does help to broaden it out. Otherwise, we'd be very small and almost start to feel like a play, right? Because there aren't a lot of people involved, and we end up on an island without a lot of other people. Just the nature of the beast. We cut to our Alan Grant, our paleontologist, fairly early on. We want to have this book has a kind of a mystery angle to it. In the beginning of it, he's talking to an investigator about the weirdness that's happened on this island. I'm like, weirdly, it makes it feel in interactions like the jungles of Costa Rica, if that makes any kind of sense, where I understand what's around me, but past that, it's very murky and you're very unsure. That's sort of the beginning angles of the book. But in this early bit, he brings up where our Dr. Grant is a little bit more famous than a normal paleontologist. He's seen what he says is an uptick in popularity because of the issues coming to play. These issues being global warming. Now, this isn't a woke book in any sense. I think it was written in the 90s before woke was a thing. So if you have that concern, don't worry too much about it. it does give you it gives you some great, meaty philosophical conversations on this. I like this little addition. It's just a small little paragraph, but it's talking about how he has been, he's been called up by media of various kinds, but also talked in front of Congress a couple times because we're trying to figure out, we being the world, what's going to happen with global warming, and that people thought maybe people who know the past could give us some insight in that. The best people who know the past and what happened are paleontologists, so it's just an odd way. What is it? The limelight can get shown on you, right? You think you're in a field that's just completely devoid of politics, and next thing you know, you're talking to Congress, right? And you're just right in the middle of it. Like, how did this happen? I'm just talking about dinosaurs. I'm like, politics, what is it? Politics finds a way. But like I said, there are philosophical conversations throughout this book. And they aren't, per the book, intended for politics' sake, if that makes sense. He's not making a political point in bringing these issues up. The character cares about these things. And with all good writing, you see a lot. If you just make a solid dialogue, the connections to other subjects just find their way in, right? So that it applies to us now with global warming and how woke things are. Doesn't mean that's what it was intended for, but it doesn't negate the connection. So in 20, 30 years, there'll be other things. And I bet you'll find connections to this book again in odd ways that, again, the author's not intending to connect himself to an issue he doesn't know about that happened 20 years after he died. He can't. But it's just a function of good writing that it keeps finding a way to make itself relevant. Our Hammond and Malcolm start to argue. Like, Hammond's very dead set on the dangers of global warming. He thinks global warming, or I think he wanted to say nuclear, because he's of that age where I guess they would be hiding under the tables and whatnot. He thinks at some point, we're going to destroy the earth. And then Malcolm is just like laughing at him. Malcolm being our physicist. Because he's just like, you're so full of yourself. All you people are so full of yourself. He says, if you dropped every nuke that we had, and he, basically say equally spaced them, the apocalypse, the be all end all, and everything's irradiated and all people die. He's like, that would just be a blip in the cataclysms that have happened on this earth since the earth came to be, right? How it's just, what does he say? Earth's endured cataclysm after cataclysm. Mountains being formed, continents sinking, species coming, life going and coming and killing itself, and then going again. He's like, almost more times than you could probably count. And you think a bunch of nukes would be any different? It would just be new life coming after that. He makes a point to say that people have no concept of, what does he say? Oxygen. That oxygen's corrosive. That there's another planet, I forget, like he said Neptune or something like this, which is mostly, what does he say, CO2 emissions. It's just, there's barely any oxygen because oxygen corrodes. But our planet's full of it. So that at some point, some plants started giving off oxygen onto this planet that didn't have oxygen. And all the other things that exist on that other, on the CO2, I think, or whatever else gases they're living on. And that as this oxygen comes, it would be a poison to them. And he's like, you just because you think it's a plant doesn't mean it wasn't the dominant organism for a while, and that it didn't have this war against oxygen, essentially speaking. And then the oxygen won out. And we have a whole batch of who knows what kind of insects and bugs and reptiles and animals that needed the other, that just got wiped out because to them this oxygen-rich plant was a cataclysm, and that now this whole life exists that breathes oxygen that's corrosive, right? And I'm like, it's just such a great overarching concept to imagine. And that's how the character thinks, right? Our Malcolm. He's always this big, broad-minded conversations where he doesn't lose track of, what is it, the horizon of time or whatever. That he can put things in its full scale and then go with it. It's very fun. He's a very fun character. And that's one of many he's had. It's one of many conversations he has. He gets very, very philosophical throughout this book. Or, back to the beginning. I'm only cover a few points here, and I'll explain why. Are Ellie and Grant, Ellie Sadler, that's the lady paleontologist, are on a dig when they get a call about, I guess they get the skeleton of a creature. And they're like, well, why are you calling me? And then they're like, they describe it, and he's like, that hasn't existed since the dinosaurs, so it's probably not that. It's probably a mistake. And we get to a point where the point gets brought up about a hoax. Now, again, from the outside, this isn't a big issue. But I'm not a paleontologist, right? I don't have to deal with this. I don't have to deal with, if you find a dinosaur bone that has never existed in your backyard, you will become kind of famous, right? This is no doubt about this. Probably more so now, I'd say, in the age of social media. You can get yourself a mass of clicks if you found ye old dinosaur bones, right? Well, that tends to lead itself to hoaxes, right? If I can trick a bunch of people, for some people that's fun. If I can fake it and get famous, I'll take that. That's the way it is for some others as well, right? So now I'm a paleontologist. I'm serious about my work. And who knows how many of these? Is it a mistake? Are they just lying, pretending to be some innocent farmer? Did he make it himself? I have to go check. I have to learn. I have to find out. Because if I get caught tricked, I'm done, right? I can't be trusted as an expert. I'm supposed to know these dino bones, and I was tricked. And how could you trust me again? People wouldn't even believe. They'd think, oh, well, he was just trying to get famous as a paleontologist, but he didn't know what he's talking about. You'd be done, right? So I didn't think of it, but it is a constant fear, I guess. Or not a constant fear. A danger your paleontologist has to be aware of. And I'll always love little insights that I get into little spheres of existence that I'm not part of. It's always very fun. Then they're also thinking in the midst of this, yes, it's probably not a dinosaur, or it could be. And I think the lady's like, if it is, it could, what is it? It could be a rediscovery is what they call it. They've done this a few times. What they say, the calicanth, I think it's a fish, I'm not sure. There's like that weird cephalopod looking fool where they're like, this is a dinosaur. They don't exist. And then like one washes up on the beach and they're like, look at it, it's still there. Right? So there's this option of somehow, I think they say alligators and sharks are also like, they've just existed since dino times, just in varying size. But there's this option of just an animal that's been forgotten, that just lives in this small area. Costa Rica could hold these animals, that it just lives and it's just essentially a dinosaur that never stopped dinoing, and we just kind of forgot about it. And they would call that, a rediscovery, where I've now found a living dinosaur. And that could make you super famous, but you have to, it's unlikely. You might even think it's a hoax, but it might end up being true. So I like those two little elements. Then obviously Hammond calls and asks them to visit his island, that he wants them to look it over, that he thinks they'll enjoy it. And he says, I'm going to pay you $20,000 a day. And I said, 20 what? Obviously, it's a book. I'm not sure how many paleontologists out there getting paid 20K a day. In any case, it was the 90s. And he's like, that could cover my research for 2, 3 years. And I'm like, I know. So, of course, they decide to go. We get this great feel of, again, I was saying about this mysteriousness. We get a good look into some corporate espionage. Dodgson, right? The little scene with the whipped cream in the movie. Not the whipped cream. The shaving cream. The scene with the shaving cream in the movie sort of happens in this book. But it's given a lot more room to breathe. No detriment, no slanderous energy from me to the movie, right? I understand you have a runtime you have to hit. It's only 2 hours long or whatever. Book, that's the benefit of a book. It has a lot more time to sit into these things. So it uses that benefit. It feeds me some corporate espionage. And you can imagine it's genetic research someone spent a lot of money on. If I can steal that research, the embryos, whatever it may be, whatever the thing they cooked up, if I can just take it and I can then, reverse engineer what you did, and you spent the money and I reap the benefits. I can imagine the levels of corporate espionage going on at your Googles and Apples and Samsung. If Apple's working on some kind of new chip that will triple the power of a processor, we're talking billions, maybe trillions, right? These companies are huge. So paying a guy to sneak in and he's getting millions would be cheap. So I can imagine. We cut to Malcolm. Malcolm being our physicist. This is a great character. He describes him as a tall, thin, balding man. This is the only negative. From the author's point of view, this is probably realistic. A physicist probably looks like this. But from the character that comes off the page, your Jeff Goldblum's who you imagine, right? What do they say? He has a deplorable excess of personality. He's got ego. He's like a rock star. He has ideas, strong ideas, always wearing just black because he likes that he doesn't have to think about his clothes in the morning, that all his thoughts may be just important, and why waste them on clothing? I don't bother with fashion or sports because it's dumb and it's a waste of time. This kind of energy he has about him. He's where a lot of our philosophical stuff is going to come from. He's very cool cat. Very memorable lines. Life finds a way, right? A line in the book. I'm going to try and explain it the way they sort of explained it in the book. And I'm going to see if I get it good. He tries to, because they're like, you already predicted that this park's going to fail. And he's like, yes, because I study chaos theory. For him, chaos theory is, what is it? We have linear versus non-linear systems. Linear system would be, I have a cannon and a cannonball. And I put the thing in and I shoot it. If I got another similar cannon, similar size ball, and similar charge, right? All these things are like the other, then the outcome will be like the first one because it's A, B, C, right? Very linear. But he says weather doesn't do that. This is the example he uses, wherein you think here's a sunny day, here's X amount of wind blowing from the north, and it's the same terrain that's always been, right? And I should have this result. But somehow the weather's different from one day to the next, and he goes in ways that are impossible. He says what ends up happening, he goes, that's what non-linear. It's the minute thing that should be overlookable ends up not being overlooked. That it's, what do you say, like the butterfly effect. One little flap of the wings throws the air here, and it cascades into this great big thing that changes the outcome completely. Non-linear. Things that don't connect but ends up connecting. And he says, right, like, so the guy's like, so chaos theory is just everything's chaos, good luck. And he's like, no, but that's the thing. Within the chaos of weather become small pockets of predictable things. They're little, like when the wind hits here, X, Y, and Z will happen. And it's the same, what is he saying, in the stock market and other very complex things. We find very stable, repeatable processes in amongst just the maelstrom of chaos. And so, like, I don't know why this is happening in this stock, but I know once it starts, it goes like this and will end up about here. So I don't need to know why. I need to know once I notice it, what's going to happen, and then I can adjust my stocks accordingly. Another example he uses is predicting a pool ball, right? You hit it where it's round, the table's flat. You should be able to, I guess, robotically hit the ball and predict every movement it makes and just walk away and not even look at it. But you can't do that, right? It becomes vastly, infinitely unpredictable. And he says, minor irregularities on the ball, minor wood grain changes, little, the heat of the day maybe, will start to make the ball, all these things add up to the ball doing something you had no idea was going to do. Where little systems, can collect together to make complex, unpredictable systems. And he says that's what he studies. And of course, he relates this all to our island. He's like, there's no way you can manufacture a thing this complex and have it work out the way you need it to. It's going to upchuck on you. It's very fun. He does that kind of level, right? Where we're going to get real into a really complex thing about 4 or 5 times. It's really fun. We get the moment where Grant sees a dinosaur for the first time. And of course, it's all the wonder you would expect. But he notices that within 35 seconds of seeing them, he's looking at them and studying them like they're 100% real, like he's getting information that was there back in the day. Which obviously isn't scientific. The world's completely different. But I was thinking, like, if this island were real, right? I think that's how it would go. I don't think, there's going to be a few people who just love to dig up old bones, that love the idea of seeing something in their hand that hadn't seen the air in, whatever, 1 million years or 50 million years or whatever the number is. That entices a certain number of people. But I think a good amount like dinosaurs, right? And I think if there was an island that had living dinosaurs, no matter how small sort of the ecosystem was, I think that would supersede whatever interest you had in the bones, right? I think it would. There's no way it wouldn't. Just run roughshod over paleontology as a whole. Now, some would grumble, like, it's not scientific, our air is different, blah, blah, blah. But I don't know how many people would really, it'd be such a fervor, right? That I think that fervor would drown out the other. At least for 100 years, at least. Before we started to settle down and go like, well, let's look at what actually, right? This kind of an energy. Hammond at one point brings up, he gets existential a little. He's bringing up him not investing in medicine, right? He has this geneticist that he wants to work with. His idea, this is his brainchild to bring dinosaurs back to life, to make the greatest amusement park ever, because who wouldn't want to come look at dinosaurs? But in this, he's like, you sort of see the salesman, right? Where you need to convince people who would be working in medicine or other fields to come work in your field. And he gets across this idea of there's no point working in medicine because they'll take it from you, essentially. That there'll be a lot of roadblocks in the way, that people think their medicine should be free, that they'll never want to pay what it's worth. Now, some of it sounds callous, but I mean, if you did front all the money for all the research and you find some cure to cancer, I don't see why that shouldn't make you rich, right? But the other half would say, it's a life saving and you shouldn't put a price on a human life. And I'm like, I agree, but why is it? I'm just side noting off of his conversation. I don't know why not putting a price on a human life has to equal free. Why isn't it the other way? Why can't I say to the person, I'm like, it's your life, isn't it worth $10,000 or whatever, right? Just as an argument's sake. We always tend to go the other way, right? But I think people don't realize that if it were free, then the quality people wouldn't be in it, and then you wouldn't get the breakthroughs that you're getting now. I think that you can become a rich doctor is some of what is spurring people to be doctors, right? At least research people. People got to eat, right? I don't have a problem with it, but I feel like a lot of people do, especially since what happened. They shot that insurance guy. I'm like, well, what the crap, bro? I don't know. But that's, again, one of those examples of a conversation that just works in the book, but then connects to modern things. It's very fun. I love when good writing does this. Now, he says, obviously, that I did this for entertainment. No one cares about entertainment, but I think the government would take that island from them, right? Now, obviously, if safety issues came up, they'd take it to be easy. But I do think behind the scenes, and what I mean behind the scenes is you have governors and senators, and they sit in rooms and they talk. And in amongst those rooms, scientists show up for various reasons. Some government official needs to talk to a scientist. They become friends, actually, like human to human friends. I feel like that island and the scientific benefit it could give would just send scientists into a tizzy, right? So much so that their governmental friends would then find a reason to get it for them. I really do think this is what happened. But he seemed to think no one would take it because it was entertainment. I'm like, nah, if whatever you're doing stirs up the masses enough, it could be taken from you. It's just majority rules. It's the way the world is, right? What are we calling it? If the fountain of youth just ended up in my backyard, I'm not getting rich off of that. They're going to take it from me. They're going to dispense it out the way they want. They being the government, probably. If not, some sort of goon who thinks they can control it. And once one goon starts, then it's just a cascade reaction, right? There's no way they wouldn't take it. We get the great explanation of how this even came to be. Your dino DNA moment in this book, not through a sit down attraction with animated worm, which works fantastic in the movie. It works well here too, but it's just Dr. Wu explaining everything. Again, I love the idea of this as a concept, that a mosquito draws some blood out of a dinosaur and then gets stuck in amber. And there's just the DNA is just sitting there. And then this potential for a rebirth just waiting frozen in amber. It's a very cool concept. Like time travel or something. It's just one of the great concepts in storytelling. He also says that we cover a lot of sort of the safety, which would come up in a reader's mind. How would you make a dinosaur park safe? Electric fences, yes. some tranquilizer, I'm assuming. They really relied on the electric fences, which was a bad idea. But also, they said they can't breed because we sterilized them with radiation. And then Malcolm's like, hold on, radiation? And then I'm sitting there like, it didn't work out so well for Dr. Banner. But, that's what they chose. But radiation, and they made them all female. So there's like, well, there's no chance because they're all female, and we sterilized them. But we all know life finds a way. What is it? Some of the DNA they used was amphibian DNA. And our Dr. Grant, I believe, gives the example of, like, I forget the type of amphibian it is, but one of them can agitate themselves into a sex change, like physically. And then once the sex change has taken place, can start reproducing, which is just kind of freaky to me. But we do have animals that can, cut in half and regrow themselves. So freaky stuff happens. But specifically with amphibians, that's where our connection is. Because, of course, they started breeding. The numbers are, complete chaos and no one knows. Of course, we know all this. Our T-Rex. Our T-Rex is clearly, right, your crown jewel of dinosaurs. It's big. It's terrifying looking. It has that huge mouth. You can just imagine it when you're standing in front of it. It's a quintessential dinosaur. But I love how in his story, he builds a better villain, a raptor. Ye old velociraptors. They're just one of the funnest dinosaurs ever. I think because I didn't know about it until obviously the movie, but the movie follows a lot of the book. That thing can fit indoors. It's highly intelligent like a bird. It can work a lock, but it also jump 25 feet in the air. And it has like a razor claw that can, cut you in half, gut you like a fish, this kind of energy. They work in packs like wolves. It's just the funnest dinosaur to put in a book because I knew the big teeth going in as a reader, but I didn't expect this sort of smart wolf-like animal that could hunt me down. Right, that would almost enjoy hunting me down. The raptors way more terrifying. Well, not more terrifying, but equally terrifying. They just have more room to eat people in this book. I think there's one part where they have like a baby raptor and they think they'll be nice to the baby and they chuck it at them and they just eat it. I'm like, Jesus. I believe they eat one of the hunters. He was like hiding in a pipe. And it went around the back and, it ate him. The raptors eat Dr. Wong. Rip Dr. Wong. Like he's in an open door and it just like comes in and yeets him out of the room. You want somebody eaten by dinosaurs if you're reading this dino book. It's not. It makes you aware of the gore without harping on it, if that makes sense. So it's not too bloody, but we're aware of what's happening. You understand when a dinosaur is eating how that's going to look. The storm comes at the same time Nedry is trying to do his great heist. Now, I don't know what exactly his plan was. I think it was just to get the crap and go. But he has ye old can of shaving cream. He shuts everything down to get access to the embryos. He fills them up. He has so much time to get to the other side of the island wherein a boat will be waiting and off he goes. I'm not sure if he was going to give them the canister, come back to his desk and be the savior. I'm not sure. He's probably very greedy. He probably wanted to do both. In any case, he gets the samples and he starts trying to drive off. But the storm came. He kind of got turned around in the storm and, eaten by dinosaurs. But you don't feel bad about that. The T-Rex scene, right? The T-Rex scene is, to me, just one of the all-time great visuals ever thought of. I mean, there's two cars. There's a large Tyrannosaurus Rex. It attacks children. It's just fantastic. Now, Book versus movie, right? In the movie, we got the great Dr. Grant with the flair, right? And then Malcolm overdoes it and gets, almost dead. This did not happen in the book. In the book, they're just sitting there watching the car get attacked, terrified. Your guy who YOLO's out in the movie doesn't die in this book, I don't believe. Plenty of people do, but I don't think he's one of them. Oh no, he gets killed later. I think by a baby dinosaur. Yeah, I think he's killed by a baby dinosaur. Baby T-Rex. He still gets eaten, just not off a toilet, which is just classic. In any case, the car gets attacked. These two guys don't do anything, which is a human reaction to seeing, like, a building size reptile attack a car. You're stupefied by it, right? It then starts coming towards their car, and Malcolm's like, well, you got to do something. So he decides to try and run, and gets kicked by the dinosaur essentially. Doesn't die, but he's wounded, and then Dr. Grant slips out, and then we use the great, if you don't move, they don't see you energy. It attacks the car and then sort of leaves. Which the book leans on this quite heavily. And on the one hand, I feel like other people have researched this subsequent to this coming out and saying, that's not possible. It would see you completely, right? But I'm like, come on. It's an author. I can't expect him to be 100% on everything. It's great. It's a great useful tool in the book because now I have a way to at least keep all my characters from just getting insta chomped down, which is probably what would happen in real life, right? If there were a bunch of tigers, everyone's just dead. But I have to find a way. So I don't blame them too much. Also, for as much as they say they know what's going on, it is the bones of a dinosaur who lived 65 million years ago, and you can't tell me you know like 100% anything about it, right? It's like, well, this is where they breathe through. I'm like, no, that was an eyeball. I'm like, how? I wouldn't have expected that. I'm like, well, the flesh isn't on it anymore. We're assuming some stuff. So I'm not gonna bury them for that. The Grant getting the kids through the park is more harrowing in this book. Very much so. The rest of the beats, I would say basically follow the movie very well. So much so that I halfway through thought I was reading a novelization. This isn't a novelization, right? I've read a couple of those. Make the movie and then decide to make a book to tell me the movie. Novelization. This isn't that. It was a standalone book, but the beats are just so good that I'm like, Spielberg's like, I'll just make this, right? I'll just film this right here. He didn't have to change anything, almost not even in the order. He didn't have to change much, right? It's beat for beat. Your T-Rex is getting stuck in a fridge. Your kid's kind of always hungry. I guess the kid girl is a little more annoying in the book than the movie. They're a little older. But overall, what happened in the movie sort of happens in this book. So you get which is better. I can't say one's better than the other. The real question isn't which is better. The real question is which, if you haven't, which do you do first? This is a tricky one for me. Because I think in a lot of ways, okay, if you enjoy reading, clearly you read that one first and you watch the movie if you like movies. But if you're 50-50, I think if you could find a way to watch it on a big screen, right? If some theater showing old movies and they put this on as an anniversary and it's your first time seeing it, I think I'd see the movie first before reading the book. If you are maybe impatient, I think you'd be okay reading the book first. It would, in a few ways, spoil some things, but in some ways it wouldn't because of the changes at the end, which I'll get to in a second. So you could read it first if you're 50-50 books or movies. Go ahead and read it first if you've never seen either. Unless you have access to just the big screen. Now, I know some people are like, well, I have a high-def screen and this and that. And I'm like, it's not the same as that loud the theater environment, right? I wouldn't put watching it on a big screen at home over reading it, maybe. I think that's the determination I'd make. To each his own, obviously. But if you just want something to go on and you're 50-50 on the matter, I think you'd be okay reading it first and then watching it on your large screen TV. Or, obviously, right to theater first. Now, if they're a kid, right? If you're like, do I let my kid listen to or do I read this book to my kid? I don't think the kid will mind much either way. Kids have great imagination. So if you want to spend ye old time with kid, read them this book and they'll enjoy it. They might ask some questions. But if you watch the movie with them in the theater, I think they'd enjoy that too. That's how I saw it. Saw it with my mom in the theaters. I think I skipped school that day. The end. The end is kind of off. What do I mean? We get to safety. We've been running from raptors for like an hour and a half, for like 4 days now, or whatever the mess was. It wasn't 4 days, but it felt long. We've been running from dinosaurs. We're now safe. The doors are locked. Everything out needs to be out. Everyone in needs to be in. We're waiting on helicopters to come because Malcolm's deteriorating. Grant then decides our work's not done. We got to go count nests. Because it's our responsibility that if we lose track of the numbers, we don't know how many need to stay. We don't know if we've killed them all. Some could leach out in the real world and then it'd be chaos, right? Like it's a pathogen or something. And that's what they do. Him, I think the lady and a guy named Gennaro go out. He like forces the Gennaro guy. I think our author's trying to make sort of a statement on maybe capitalism or this kind of energy, like it's you're responsible because you didn't check this investment well enough. And I'm like, and me and the guy are sort of saying like, bro, chill. The army's going to come in a second. But he's really pressuring the guy into going out. I think that guy ends up dead. I'm not exactly sure, but I'm like, I don't remember specifically. But I just thought it was weird that Dr. Grant, they're going to go out and look for nests. I'm like, one, you're going to get eaten by a dinosaur. You don't have any weapons, essentially, to stop it. Two, it's not really your job. You're a paleontologist. What do you know about finding actual nests of actual dinosaurs? And it wasn't for like to research it like I'm interested. Like he thought someone needs to check these numbers. I'm like, you don't have to do that today, bro. We're on an island. The army's going to come in a minute. This is going to be chaotic. You don't think the world's going to care about this? We'll find the other dinosaurs if that's the case. He was real adamant about it, though. They just start trekking off into the desert. They eventually all get on, what is it? No. They're trekking off doing that. Hammond decides to go back to his bungalow for some reason. Gets spooked and like runs. Falls down a hill and sort of hurt himself. He's 70. So he's struggling to get up the hill. And then gets eaten by dinosaurs. Right? And I'm like, well, Hammond didn't need to die. But I guess it's maybe like you tried to play God and got punished. This kind of a twinge of this energy. It did feel off, though. I'm like, oh, God didn't need to die. And as they're getting on the helicopter, our Grant's asking, the kids get saved. Grant gets saved. Adler gets saved. The hunter gets saved. He was wily in this one. He didn't die. He didn't go out there trying to hunt some raptors. Clever girls didn't get him. He gets saved, but then Malcolm somehow, they say Malcolm doesn't make it, right? So he succumbed to his wounds. I'm like, nah, you don't want to kill Malcolm. He's too cool. Now, I think I've read the sequel. I read these in order, and I think Malcolm somehow lives because I guess he was too popular. That's happened before for authors. But the end was kind of, I'm not going to say weird. It fit the book. And that's why I say if you read it first, then you'll get that out of it, and then you'll have an unexpected end in the movie because the movie ends differently. And in that sense, you can enjoy them both. But if I redid it, I'd read it first and then watch the movie first. And I thought the endings were weird. I'm like, of all the things you're doing that are right in the pocket, leaving safety after you've been running from dinosaurs all day is not like a thing people would do. I'm staying indoors. I'm waiting for the military, the guys with the big guns to come. and get me the crap out of here. Whatever else happens at this island is not my business. Little oddity in the end, but, few books are perfection. I still like this book. Ad time? These are my books. If you buy them, you help the channel. You will also then own a book. You can also get Kindle Unlimited and read them off of there in a Spotify-ish style system, wherein I get money if you read the book, and other authors get money if you read their books that are also on. So, if my books end up sucking, which I cannot tell anymore because, too far in the woods to see the trees, then you won't have lost any money. And you can read other books and get value out of it. But if you do like them, you can buy them. Either way helps. You can also subscribe if you're inclined. You can comment if you're interested. Or you can just watch. Thank you if you do any of those. Thank you sincerely. I will see you all next week.